For decades, Area 51 has been the epicenter of conspiracy theories, whispered secrets, and government denial. But what happens when new evidence emerges?
So you get inside this thing, and it's designed for something that's much smaller than a human being.
Yeah, you can't really stand up till you get to the very center of it.
And what do you think this was designed for?
I'd say something close to half my height.
Wow. So these little 3-foot tallish creatures.
Evidence that was supposedly hidden from us. On Joe Rogan's podcast, Bob Lazar, the man who put Area 51 on the map, discusses newly declassified photos that could change everything we think we know.
My gosh. They're all going against the wind. The wind's 120 knots from the west.
Are they proof of extraterrestrial technology, or is there a more grounded explanation? Let's take a deep dive into the mystery.
Now notice the eyes are different, nose are different, but they do have 5 fingers, 5 toes, 2 eyes.
Before we even get into the photos and Bob Lazar's claims, you really need to understand why Area 51 has been such a magnet for secrecy and speculation in the first place. The shocking truth about Area 51. Area 51 isn't just a military base, it's a symbol of mystery.
Insectoid alien JRE said that he had actually come from our future.
Tucked away in the Nevada desert, its very existence was denied by the U.S. government until 2013, despite being one of the worst-kept secrets in history.
I can't, it's so cold. Here we go.
The facility is officially a testing ground for advanced aircraft, but for many, it represents something far more elusive, proof that the government is hiding something about extraterrestrial life. The rumors really took off in the 1950s when locals and military personnel started reporting strange lights and unidentified flying objects in the skies above the base. The official explanation? Experimental aircraft. And to be fair, Area 51 has been home to some of the most cutting-edge aviation projects, from the U-2 spy plane to the stealth fighter. But that didn't stop the speculation. After all, why would a simple aircraft testing site require such extreme levels of secrecy? One of the biggest accelerators of Area 51's mythos was the Cold War. The U.S. was locked in a technological arms race with the Soviet Union, and military advancements were classified at the highest levels. Spy planes, surveillance tech, and next-generation aircraft were all being developed in the shadows. But secrecy has a way of fueling curiosity, and the more the government denied, the more people suspected they weren't telling the whole truth. Then came the testimonies, whistleblowers, former employees, and even high-ranking officials who hinted that Area 51 wasn't just about human technology. Some claimed to have seen UFOs up close, while others alleged that the government was reverse engineering alien spacecraft in underground labs. Whether fact or fiction, these stories became the foundation of modern UFO lore. Bob Lazar played a huge role in this narrative, but we'll get to him in a moment. First, let's talk about the government's response. For years, the military and intelligence agencies brushed off the rumors, calling them conspiracy theories. Yet, ironically, their tight-lipped approach only made things worse. Even when documents were declassified, they often raised more questions than answers. In 2019, things took an even stranger turn when a viral Facebook event, Storm Area 51, gathered millions of responses. It started as a joke but quickly became a pop culture phenomenon, with people seriously considering rushing the gates in search of extraterrestrial secrets. The government's swift response, including warnings that deadly force could be used, only reinforced the idea that there was something there worth protecting. But all the secrecy and speculation surrounding Area 51 wouldn't have reached the mainstream without one man: Bob Lazar. His claims weren't just wild theories, they were detailed, technical, and specific. And whether you believe him or not, you must first learn more about who Bob Lazar is to fully comprehend what's going on now.
This is why people keep seeing flying saucers, because it's ours and we've just been testing it, probably for all these years.
The untold story about Bob Lazar that will surprise you.
Exactly what's going on up there?
Well, there's several, actually 9
flying saucers, flying discs that are out there of extraterrestrial origin.
In 1989, Bob Lazar went public with a story that sounded straight out of science fiction. He claimed to have worked at a top-secret facility near Area 51 called S4, where he was assigned to reverse engineer alien technology. According to him, the U.S. government wasn't just aware of extraterrestrial spacecraft, they had possession of several of them. Unlike most UFO whistleblowers, Lazar came armed with a technical background. He spoke about propulsion systems that defied physics, particularly a gravity-based engine powered by element 115.
But it's 115. They will continue to take or experiment and try and make 115 at different isotopes, and I'm sure eventually they'll come up with a stable version.
A then unknown substance that he claimed was the key to anti-gravity travel. At the time, mainstream science dismissed the idea of such an element existing. But years later, moscovium, element 115, was officially synthesized, fueling speculation that maybe Lazar wasn't making it all up. His story didn't just sound compelling, it was disturbingly detailed. He described how these spacecraft had no conventional wiring, no visible propulsion, and no seams or rivets. He also mentioned hand scanners used for employee access at S4, devices that were unheard of at the time, but later turned out to be real technology used by military contractors. Of course, his claims weren't without controversy. Almost immediately, efforts were made to discredit him. His supposed education records at MIT and Caltech were wiped clean, and his employment history at Los Alamos National Laboratory, where he claimed to have worked, was nowhere to be found. Some took this as proof that he was lying, while others saw it as evidence of a government cover-up. But whether you believe Lazar or not, one thing is undeniable. He single-handedly reshaped the conversation about UFOs and Area 51. Before his interview with investigative journalist George Knapp, Area 51 was barely a blip on the radar of mainstream media. Afterward, it became synonymous with secret government projects and extraterrestrial technology. Lazar didn't try to cash in on his story. In fact, he largely withdrew from the public eye for years, refusing interviews and avoiding attention.
Flying saucers, flying discs that are out there of extraterrestrial origin.
If he were just another conspiracy theorist seeking fame, why disappear? Instead, he quietly built a scientific supply business, only resurfacing decades later in Joe Rogan's now famous podcast episode. And that's where things get even more interesting, because during that conversation, Lazar not only stood by his original claims, he also hinted that new information, including declassified photos, could help prove his story right. Was he finally getting the validation he had waited for? Or was this just another layer of mystery in an already strange saga? To find out, we have to look at Joe Rogan's role in bringing these revelations to the masses. Joe Rogan's shocking statements in his podcast. Joe Rogan has built his podcast, The Joe Rogan Experience, into a powerhouse of open-ended discussions, often featuring guests with mind-bending stories. From scientists and historians to conspiracy theorists and whistleblowers, Rogan thrives on deep conversations that challenge mainstream narratives. But when he invited Bob Lazar onto his show in 2019, even he seemed taken aback by what unfolded. Unlike a typical interview with a UFO enthusiast, this conversation was different. Lazar didn't come across as someone desperately trying to convince people of his story. If anything, he seemed reluctant, almost exhausted from decades of skepticism and scrutiny. His responses were measured, technical, and at times frustratingly cautious, far from the wild, exaggerated claims one might expect from a hoaxer. One of the key moments in the interview was when Lazar described how the craft he worked on supposedly manipulated gravity itself. He explained that it didn't operate like any conventional aircraft, but rather created its own gravitational field, bending space-time around it. Rogan, known for pushing his guests to elaborate, kept digging deeper, trying to make sense of the science behind it. The more Lazar explained, the more it seemed to intrigue Rogan rather than set off any alarms of dishonesty. But perhaps the most significant part of the conversation wasn't just Lazar's claims, it was the fact that some of the things he had described in the late 80s were now being talked about in official government reports. Rogan, who often approaches conspiracy theories with a mix of skepticism and curiosity, pointed out that the Pentagon had recently declassified documents confirming the existence of UFOs, or UAPs, unidentified aerial phenomena, as they now call them. Could this mean Lazar had been telling the truth all along? Adding another layer to the mystery, Lazar spoke about declassified photos and new evidence that seemed to align with his past claims. He wasn't the one revealing them, but he acknowledged their importance, suggesting they could further validate what he had been saying for years. Rogan, clearly intrigued, pressed him for details, but Lazar remained cautious, emphasizing that he had already said everything he could say.
You were involved in what kind of work?
Nuclear weapon development, physics. I mean, they do everything there.
The episode quickly became one of Rogan's most watched interviews, sparking renewed debate about Area 51, secret government projects, and whether extraterrestrial technology had truly been recovered. It wasn't just the usual UFO enthusiasts tuning in. Scientists, skeptics, and mainstream audiences were now paying attention. But what exactly were these declassified photos? And did they provide undeniable proof? Or were they just another piece of an ever-growing puzzle? To answer that, we need to take a closer look at what was actually revealed. Unveiling the declassified photos. In recent years, the U.S. government has declassified numerous documents and photographs related to its clandestine operations, including those at Area 51. These releases, often obtained through Freedom of Information Act FOIA requests, offer a rare glimpse into the activities conducted at this secretive base. One notable release includes aerial images of the Groom Lake facility, showcasing its expansive runways, hangars, and testing areas. These photos, once classified, now provide the public with a clearer view of the base's infrastructure. While they don't confirm the existence of extraterrestrial technology, they do highlight the advanced aerospace projects undertaken there. Additionally, documents detailing the development of aircraft like the U-2 spy plane and the A-12OXC ART have been made public. These records illustrate the cutting-edge research and development that took place at Area 51 during the Cold War era. The innovative designs and technologies employed in these projects were decades ahead of their time, often leading to public sightings of unidentified flying objects, which were, in reality, test flights of these secret aircraft. While these declassified materials don't provide evidence of alien spacecraft, they do offer context for the numerous UFO sightings reported over the years. The advanced nature of the aircraft tested at Area 51, combined with the secrecy surrounding them, contributed to the aura of mystery that continues to captivate the public's imagination. When the newly declassified images surfaced, they immediately caught the attention of both UFO enthusiasts and skeptics. The photos, released through official government channels and Freedom of Information Act FOIA requests, depict high-altitude aerial shots of previously restricted sections of Area 51 and S4, as well as structural layouts that had never been seen by the public before. Some images show strange, unidentified objects, ones that don't seem to match any known aircraft. For those who have followed the Area 51 mystery for years, these photos were a breakthrough. One of the most notable aspects was that some of the facilities described by Lazar decades ago, such as underground hangars embedded into the side of a mountain, appear to align with what the declassified images reveal. This doesn't necessarily confirm his claims, but it does add credibility to the idea that there were parts of the base that were deliberately hidden from public knowledge. However, not everyone is convinced. Skeptics argue that while the photos are intriguing, they don't necessarily prove anything related to alien technology. Many believe that what's being seen are classified military aircraft and experimental prototypes, similar to how the U-2 spy plane was once mistaken for a UFO during the Cold War. In other words, just because something looks unusual doesn't mean it's extraterrestrial. That said, there are details that can't be easily explained. Some of the unidentified objects captured in these images lack conventional propulsion systems, meaning no visible wings, exhaust trails, or rotors, features typically present in even the most advanced military aircraft. This aligns eerily well with Lazar's descriptions of the crafts he allegedly worked on at S4, which he claimed operated using a form of gravity propulsion rather than jet or rocket engines. Even more curious is that some of the structures in the photos appear to have been heavily modified or removed in later satellite images. Some theorists suggest this could be an attempt to conceal something that was briefly exposed when the images were first released. The question is, what was so important that it had to be covered up? Adding to the intrigue, some documents that accompanied the photos contained heavily redacted sections, fueling speculation about what information was still being withheld. If these were just ordinary military installations, why would entire paragraphs be blacked out? What was so sensitive that it had to remain classified even after these images were made public? While Joe Rogan's podcast brought Bob Lazar's story to a massive audience, his revelations didn't stop there. In recent years, he has made several appearances outside of Rogan's show, continuing to stand by his claims despite ongoing scrutiny, and he's not the only one. Other whistleblowers, some from within the U.S. government itself, have stepped forward, adding more layers to the mystery. If Lazar was once an outlier, he's no longer alone. Bob Lazar's shocking news statements and more shocking UFO whistleblower. Since his appearance on the Joe Rogan Experience, Lazar has remained relatively low-key, but he has given occasional interviews and continued to discuss his claims in controlled settings. In a 2021 documentary titled Bob Lazar, Area 51 and Flying Saucers, directed by Jeremy Corbell, Lazar provided additional insights into his experiences at S4. He reiterated that the craft he worked on was of non-human origin, and explained how he had been warned about speaking publicly, even suggesting he had been threatened. One of the more chilling details he revealed in this documentary was that the government wasn't just studying alien technology, they were allegedly trying to recreate it. Lazar claimed that several scientists had been tasked with reverse engineering propulsion systems and that many of them had no idea what they were even working on. Instead of being given the full picture, they were isolated in teams, each assigned to a different part of the technology without context. This compartmentalization ensured that no single person could fully understand or leak the entire project. But Lazar isn't the only one making bold claims. In 2023, David Grush, a former intelligence officer with the Pentagon's Unidentified Aerial Phenomena Task Force.
My name is David Charles Grush. I was an intelligence officer for 14 years, both in the U.S. Air Force, both active duty, Air National Guard, and Reserve.
Made headlines when he testified before Congress, stating that the U.S. government has been in possession of non-human biological remains and advanced craft for decades.
As I've stated publicly already in my News Nation interview, biologics came with some of these recoveries, yeah.
Were they, I guess, human or non-human biologics?
Non-human, and that was the assessment of people with direct knowledge on the program I talked to that are currently still on the program.
He alleged that these programs were being run in deep secrecy, beyond the oversight of even high-ranking officials. Grush's credibility is significant. Unlike previous UFO whistleblowers, he had direct access to classified military files and was considered a highly trusted figure. Then there's Dr. Stephen Greer, a longtime UFO disclosure advocate who has compiled testimonies from numerous government insiders. In mid-2023, Greer held a press conference presenting multiple former military and intelligence officials who backed up claims of hidden alien technology programs. Some of these individuals stated they had personally worked on secret recovery operations involving unidentified craft. What makes all of this even more intriguing is how closely some of these testimonies align with Lazar's decades-old claims. The descriptions of the crafts, the way the projects were compartmentalized, and even the mention of biological entities all echo what Lazar has been saying since 1989. Could this be the long-awaited validation of his story, or are these simply parallel claims that only appear to support each other? Regardless of whether one believes Lazar, Grush, or Greer, one thing is clear: the conversation about UFOs is no longer just fringe speculation. It's happening in government hearings, being discussed by intelligence officials, and breaking into mainstream media. Now, you may think those photos only show advanced spacecraft and that Area 51 is just a U.S. military base, but then what about the mystery of Element 115? Bob Lazar has recently opened up about this elusive element and the high-tech spacecraft that supposedly defy physics, technology that, according to him, humans could not have invented.
Determines what element it is. So element 115 has 115 protons in it. It's element 115.
If true, this would be one of the strongest pieces of evidence supporting his claims. But what exactly has Lazar revealed about it recently? Bob Lazar finally opens up about the science behind anti-gravity and element 115. One of the most fascinating and controversial aspects of Bob Lazar's story is his claim that the crafts he worked on at S4 used a propulsion system unlike anything known to modern physics. Instead of jet engines or rockets, they allegedly operated on gravity-based propulsion powered by an exotic material, element 115. For years, Lazar described this element as the key to anti-gravity technology, stating that it could create a force field around a craft, allowing it to bend space-time and travel in ways conventional physics says are impossible. The problem? When he first made these claims in the late 1980s, element 115 didn't officially exist. Scientists dismissed it as pure fantasy. Then, in 2003, Russian researchers successfully synthesized moscovium, element 115, in a lab. While this form of the element was unstable and decayed within milliseconds, its very existence validated part of Lazar's story. He had spoken about an element that didn't exist at the time but was later confirmed by modern science. More recently, Lazar has given additional insight into how element 115 was allegedly used in these spacecraft. In an interview following his Joe Rogan Experience appearance and in the documentary Bob Lazar, Area 51 and Flying Saucers,
and there's this very heavy element fuel, element 115, something that wasn't on our periodic charts.
He reiterated that the material was somehow stable in the alien crafts, allowing them to generate an intense gravitational field. He explained that when properly configured, it amplified gravity waves, effectively making the craft weightless and allowing it to accelerate without producing any heat or visible propulsion. Lazar also suggested that scientists at S4 were actively trying to replicate this process, but with limited success. The biggest challenge? Humans have only managed to create element 115 in unstable forms, meaning that if a stable version exists somewhere in the universe, it's not naturally occurring on Earth. While mainstream scientists remain skeptical, some of the latest developments in aerospace research show eerie similarities to what Lazar described. Defense contractors like Lockheed Martin's Skunk Works and the U.S. Air Force's secretive research programs have explored gravity-based propulsion concepts. Even NASA has investigated exotic propulsion systems involving space-time manipulation. Could these efforts be inspired by something already known behind classified doors? If Bob Lazar's claims about element 115 and anti-gravity technology seem too unbelievable, consider this: he isn't the first person to describe something extraordinary. Over the years, multiple UFO incidents have been reported, investigated, and even partially declassified by the U.S. government. From mysterious objects seen by trained military pilots to entire programs designed to study unidentified aerial phenomena, the evidence isn't just in Lazar's words, it's in history itself. Historical UFO cases and declassified government programs. The U.S. government has long maintained a policy of denial and secrecy when it comes to UFOs, but leaked documents and official declassifications show that behind the scenes, they've been taking these encounters seriously for decades. Some cases have been outright dismissed, but others remain unexplained, even by military and intelligence agencies. The Roswell Incident, 1947, the birth of UFO conspiracies.
Edition, July 8, 1947. The Army Air Forces has announced that a flying disc has been found and is now in the possession of the Army.
One of the most infamous UFO cases in history, the Roswell incident in New Mexico, set the stage for modern extraterrestrial theories. Initially, the U.S. Army reported recovering a flying disc from a crash site, but within 24 hours they retracted that statement, claiming it was just a weather balloon. The sudden shift in narrative fueled speculation that the military was hiding something, especially after witnesses described seeing strange metallic debris and even small humanoid bodies. For years, the Roswell story was dismissed as a hoax until declassified Air Force reports in the 1990s admitted that something more than a balloon had crashed. Though they claimed it was a top-secret spy balloon project, Project Mogul, many still believe that Roswell was a cover-up for something far more extraordinary. Project Blue Book, 1952 to 1969, the government's official UFO study.
What the hell just happened?
Despite dismissing UFOs in public, the U.S. Air Force actively investigated them through Project Blue Book, a classified program that analyzed over 12,000 reported sightings. While most were deemed misidentified aircraft or natural phenomena, a small percentage, around 701 cases, remained completely unexplained. The program concluded that UFOs pose no threat to national security, but former project members later claimed that not all reports were made public. The real question, was Project Blue Book meant to study UFOs or to control the public narrative about them? The 2004 USS Nimitz Tic Tac UFO encounter, a modern mystery.
My gosh. They're all going against the wind. The wind's 120 knots to the west.
If you think UFO sightings are just a relic of the past, think again. In 2004, U.S. Navy pilots flying off the USS Nimitz encountered a tic-tac-shaped craft moving in ways that defied all known physics: rapid acceleration, instant direction changes, and no visible propulsion system. Declassified videos of the encounter, released in 2017 by the Pentagon's Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, AATIP, confirmed that the military had been tracking such objects for years. What's more, high-ranking officials have admitted that these objects exhibit technology beyond human capabilities. Government programs that admit UFOs are real. In recent years, government programs like AATIP and its successor, the UAP Task Force, have confirmed what many long suspected. Unidentified aerial phenomena are real, and they remain unexplained. The U.S. government has acknowledged that certain craft display advanced capabilities beyond anything publicly known, yet no nation has taken credit for them. This leaves two possibilities. A foreign country has developed futuristic technology far beyond U.S. capabilities. These objects are not from Earth. Both options raise enormous questions, but they also make Bob Lazar's claims harder to ignore. If these crafts have been seen repeatedly by trained military pilots, why is it so impossible to believe that the government has already studied them? With all this in mind, public perception of UFOs is starting to shift, but are people truly ready to accept the implications? But let us know in the comments below.